Greetings, my name is JC,
And I'm Ian,
and this is the Gamer's Gaiden. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Sega Dreamcast.
because this is a really important week. I mean, we
Yeah,
missed it by a couple of days, but
yeah.
we're 20 years away from the anniversary of the release of the Dreamcast in North America.
Originally launched on 9/9/99, and now that it's 2019, it was 20 years ago now, so we decided we should talk about it.
Yeah,
That, and it's kind of one of my favorite consoles.
I mean, there's also that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today, so be sure to stay tuned. But before we get into that, if you do like this video and like what we do, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. We have weekly podcasts and extra videos during the week as well, so stay tuned for those as well. And to start things off, Ian, what have you been playing this week?
well, I'm gonna start off by saying I finally finished Fire Emblem Three Houses.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, took me around 80 hours,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna put up a week or a video, maybe this week or next week,
Mhm.
kind of on my final thoughts on the game.
But can you give us at least a thumbs up or a thumbs down for overall verdict?
Oh, ugh.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. No,
Any-
I did enjoy it,
Cool.
but yeah.
Awesome. And
But I did play some other things.
yeah, you I know you played a game that we posted on the Facebook page on
I did. My anyone who saw that might have recognized my exclamation points as excitement. Yeah, I picked up Blasphemous on Tuesday.
Cool.
I'm
Did you get it on the Switch or
I got it on the
Steam?
Switch.
Okay.
And I'm horrible.
Uh-oh.
I am so bad.
It's a really, really hard game.
You know what? Maybe it's not that bad, but I am not that good at it.
Okay.
So I'm gonna work at it. It's gonna take a lot of time, because, like I said, I'm really bad.
Mm-hmm.
But
What are the gameplay style mechanics that are making it difficult? Is it just because you have to time things like Dark Souls or something like that, or?
yeah, it has that kind of that Souls-like combat to it,
Kind of
where
reaction and attack and
you got to dodge, parry, counterattack,
right.
that kind of stuff, and I'm not great at that.
Hmm.
I'm especially coming fresh off of just grinding tactical
Yeah,
combat.
turn-based tactical combat where you
Where
don't
my reaction
necessarily.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I can just walk into the middle and just like, everybody hit me. I just want to level up. No, it's really cool though. Like, the environments are just amazing to look at. The enemies are really cool looking.
Yeah, because they're fairly large and they encompass a lot of the screen and
The
have their
bosses are great. I
Mhm.
mean, I've only fought one,
right.
but even the like minions wandering around,
Cool.
like, they're very well thought out. Everything's creepy,
Right.
like religious creepy,
Mm.
which is kind of fun.
That's a neat aesthetic.
Yeah,
It's like a gothic Macbeth horror.
it's very like European, but like Spanish,
Mhm.
or like Spanish Inquisition.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially since of its content.
and the developers are from Spain.
Okay. So
And
it all adds up.
I did learn that the
The
helmet of
Yeah.
the penitent one, that's actually a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have the face on it,
Right.
but they do. There's like a Holy Week in
Right.
Spain where they actually wear these pointed hats, and they're called, like, I think they're essentially called penitent ones.
Right.
So it's kind of neat,
Cool.
kind of based in reality. I'll probably try to give more updates on it as I go, but it's gonna take me a really long time because I'm really horrible. I want to know about you guys doing great at it.
Yeah.
Send me
let us
videos of
know.
you succeeding. And also I picked up Astral Chain.
Awesome. That's a pretty big release that happened this last week.
Yeah, I missed it by a week because it was the week previous,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't find it anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it took me forever. My good friend Matt,
Mm-hmm.
at a local game store. No one's paying me, so I'm not promoting, but he managed to find me a copy.
Awesome.
So I got
Well,
that.
thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I probably played about 30 minutes just
Okay.
because I only got it a few days ago.
Oh, okay.
But so far, real cool.
Awesome.
And
It's got the same good feeling, the same type of feeling that from their previous types of games. Because like a lot of the developers' games are very similar, right? Like there's
Yeah,
same.
Platinum does a lot
Yeah.
of, with the exception of or I think one game. Pretty much all of it is very much like combo based
Mm-hmm.
action games.
Yep.
So yeah, no, it's a little like Bayonetta,
Cool. Cool.
just no heal guns,
Right.
just a regular handgun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the theme is different.
But
We've
still,
moved on to something new.
still handcuffs.
Okay.
No whips yet, but
Not yet. You're only
handcuffs.
30 minutes in. I mean, give
That's
it time.
true.
You can't spoil everything right away. It's
Fair
just
enough. I will give more thoughts on it as I go, but
cool.
yeah. But JC, what have you been playing?
I've been playing a little bit of League.
Oh, this was the Star Guardian skins, right?
Yeah. So I already unlocked the Prestige Nico Star Guardian skin. So
Wow.
that was pretty
Okay.
cool. I kind of might have thrown some loot boxes at it, but
We won't talk about that.
yeah. Yeah, surprise mechanics. I love them. So uh,
Stop promoting it, JC.
well, these are different than the ones that EA does. They're not pay to win. They're just flashy. So I played some League with some friends during the week, and that was pretty fun.
Nice.
The quests are pretty normal. I was a little bit disappointed about the event though, because it didn't really make an event out of it. So I would like to basically say that like the last year they had their own little mini game that was a Star Guardian game,
It was a
and
lot of fun.
yeah, it was definitely fun. It was a little too hard as to the testament of a lot of people on the forums and Reddit. Like a lot of people weren't able to complete the quests.
No, it was challenging.
I was one of them. We couldn't form a good enough team to be able to beat it.
Same.
So, but I figured what they could have done was tweak that a little bit so it was a little bit more fair and just like have you available to play that again. But they didn't. So that was kind of disappointing because they re-release like Earth and stuff like that, or bring back these like old gaming modes that like are more nostalgic for other League players. But like I haven't played League as long as some people, so season 7 start. So I don't know about some of these other game modes, but one of the other new game modes that I tried, which I guess is a full game and not a game mode, is TFT or Teamfight Tactics.
Oh, okay.
Um, this game made me rage a lot. Oh my god.
Isn't
So
it just chess? But like weird
sure,
chess?
it has chess-like mechanics. So you have a board that's maybe 10 by 10 or something. I don't really know how many squares it has, but it's a grid board. It's actually a hex one, but you have different rows of you can place it on the bottom half. Your enemy places on the top half, but they just see the inverse of it. So you get different champions. It's kind of like a card game actually. So it's how I kind of relate to it. So there's different level of champions and effectiveness of them. And so some of them will be like a gray, and then some of them will be blue or purple or gold. There's different tiers of them as well, but
Okay.
it's their power level basically, and it's also their effectiveness or rarity as well. So like Tristana would be like a tier 1 card, but then Draven you don't see until later. Generally, he's rare to see, and he's like a purple card. So you'd see him a lot later. He's more useful due to his abilities. Each character has their own abilities, and there's also equipment that you can pick up. So your little dude can run around the map, and you've got different phases where you fight PvE, and you do that a few times, and then you fight PvP. During the PvE, you're basically deck building, and you have this row on the bottom, which are these champions that you've paid for, and you have this gold. You get gold and items from every round and from the monsters that you fight. And so, like in concept, this game sounds great, and I really, really, really want to like it. But uh, anyway. But
Okay.
so you work through each stage, and then eventually get to the PvP stages, and what you've built out of the stuff that you've bought, and every round basically it refreshes the cards on the bottom and their
Now, when you
champions.
say stuff you've bought, do you mean stuff you bought like for money Or like stuff that you purchase with gold in the game?
Yeah, you get coins in the game.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no money involved in this. It's a
Okay.
free-to-play game as well. And the only loot box mechanics are like skins for your little figure. You can make it look like the like a you can make it look like a Pengu or a Poro or something like that if you want,
Oh, okay.
right? There's no pay-to-win mechanic in this at all.
That's cool.
So you pay for your cards and you get these champions, and if you get a set of 3, it levels them up, and then if you get 3 sets of 3, it levels it up to a level 3. So and you can put different champions, and there's a rule for how many champions you can have on the board. It's what your level is. And you can trade in gold to gain experience points, or you can use gold to buy cards. And then there's combo sets. So if you have Yordles, you'll get a bonus. If you have Sorcerers, you'll get a bonus. If you have Rangers, you have a bonus. Brawlers, you get a bonus. There's a bunch of them. And some of them are more effective than others. And each champion has their own ability. And then there's different items. And then basically, just like League, you have uh, you have a low tier item, and then they combine to build a bigger item. It's more simplified than the actual item building in League, but it's based off of it. And so some items work better on different champions. And I think my problem with it is that there's a large learning curve on it, and I don't necessarily know how all the ADCs work and stuff like that in the game, or the top laners. So I don't know what items really go good on some of these characters, and some of
Okay.
them, their synergies don't work with some of the items as well. So anyway, so because like a Tristana isn't as effective as a Draven, for example, you can level her up and then she'll be like as effective as like a lone Draven, because it's more rare to get a leveled up Draven, for example. And if you give them items, they'll do more damage. You can get like Redemption or Locket or like Rapid Fire Cannon and stuff like that. And so you work for the through the PvE stuff. You work through the PvP stuff, and then there's a round robin where there's a ring of champions, and you run up to it to grab one of the champions that you want, and those champions have items, and you're constantly building your stuff. You can't re-equip stuff unless you sell your champions, which in some cases you'll want to do or not want to do. But the problem I have with this game is it's RNG. And you can argue with me all you want about there's not that much RNG, but I'm sorry if you know anything about statistics, it's bullshit. You can mitigate your chances of getting it, but the reality of the fact is that those cards on the bottom and the items that you get up are all completely random out of a set pool, so you don't necessarily know what you're getting. So if you're lucky, emphasis on lucky, you can basically get the right cards, and you can mitigate and strategize and increase your probability to be able to win, and that's really what the game is about. And I like those types of games, but the random effect with my current knowledge set, and I've only maybe played about 10 hours of this game, it is not as high as I would like it to be. But I am getting better at the game. And what really fucking frustrated me about this game is I literally logged in and AFK'd, and I won third place. I don't understand why. Like, I built a set of 5 champions, and then I walked away. And I had some champions on the bottom, and somehow I got third. I don't understand, like, why that should be possible. I should have been in the bottom 4.
How many people?
8.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and whenever you're playing ranked, if you're in the top 4, you gain elo, and if you're in the bottom 4, you lose elo. And yeah, so anyway, so I really want to like the game, but I just really have some issues with the game with its randomness. And yeah, so it's very like knights and nobles. If you get that combination, it's broken. But let's say if you happen upon that combination, and if you happen upon specific combinations based off of your cards and not having to constantly re-roll, because if you re-roll your cards, you can pay 2 coins to just flush your cards to bring up others. You take your money out. If you don't have to do that, and you happen to get other cards, like let me put it this way: if I'm playing the game normally, and you're playing, and then you happen to get 2 more items than I have, and you have twice as many champions in your pool than I have, that means you didn't have to re-roll anything. You randomly got dropped more items in the PvE environment sections than I did, and you're going to win if the cards align in your favor, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. It literally doesn't matter, and that's what frustrates me, is that can win the game. I Parallel in closing is to Robo Rally. If you don't know how to play Robo Rally, you basically essentially program your moves with cards. I want to move straight, I want to move left, I want to move right. I have literally shuffled my hand every single time and turn and randomly assign my turns and got second place in that game. Sure, I didn't win, but I got 3 of the 4 targets I could have potentially won just by randomly shuffling my hand and not caring where I'm going. The reason why I lost is because of my randomness, I went off the board and that wasn't allowed, and that auto killed me. So if I had changed my mind and then all of a sudden started to actually program my robot, I potentially could have won because I was actually really close to it. But my goal was to try and win by randomly winning it, and that's why that's the dumbest board game to me. And this I randomly got third by literally AFKing after I got 5 champions and then 2 synergies. I didn't even level them up. I didn't do anything. It auto assigns you something in the round roulette if you don't move. It auto puts a character in it if you have it in your roster and you level up. So I just made sure I had actual characters in my roster. I put them in a certain order. I walked away. I made toast. I ate the toast. I went to the bathroom. I went and got a drink. I drank it. I put it in the dishwasher. I came back and it told me I had 1/3. I shouldn't be able to do that. Anyway, yeah. TFT. If I get better at it and I actually do start to like it, I'll talk about it again then. But that's what I played this week. Yeah.
So the Dreamcast, segueing onto much nicer things, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. The Dreamcast was a lot more fun. It was a huge bummer that it didn't go as well, but
Yeah, because it ended up ultimately not saving the company's hardware division, and then made them change to decide that Sega is only going to be releasing software on every consoles. And there's pros and cons to that, because now it doesn't matter what console I buy, I can play my Sega games.
it's true. It's very true.
Yeah.
But let's kind of get into the launch and the launch games.
Yeah, for sure. So to start, the launch in Japan was actually a year earlier than 9999 for the North American launch. And the Japanese launch was actually in November of 1998. And some interesting facts about that is that the system's Power VR2 chipset, which is actually its GPU, actually had a high failure rate in its original manufacturing process. And it actually caused a shortage of the amount of consoles that Japan wanted to originally produce during the first little while of the console being produced there.
Yeah, they pre-sold about half of what they ended up having, and when they realized they weren't going to be able to get more,
Yeah.
they just kind of cut off, and they're like, well, no more pre-orders, and then sold through like immediately what they had.
And the speculation is that they would have potentially been able to sell 200 to 300,000 more units in Japan if this hadn't been an issue.
And that's a substantial number, like at launch. You like, yeah, we're talking the difference between like,
that's
that
millions
could have
of dollars in revenue.
Millions of dollars in revenue that could have potentially been double the install base.
Yep.
I can't remember what the number was that they actually ended up selling in their first launch window, but yeah. like.
And the interesting thing about this is that like the Saturn was the leading console in Japan, and the fact that it was the leading console, like that's why they think that they would have been able to sell those 200,000 or 300,000 extra consoles, and this kind of potentially prevented a lot of people in Japan from buying that console. But in North American, with its launch, as I mentioned, it's 9999, which they definitely use that a lot in its advertisements because of that like once in a lifetime chance. I guess it was 1999, not 9,999. But yeah.
But it was 199. in 999. At
Yeah,
least in the US. It was probably like 250 in Canada.
yeah, it was something like that. But yeah, that advert of the date and its thinking was kind of its main two advertisements, slogans, so to speak. Sega has always had like really great like marketing, whether it be "Welcome to the Next Level" or Genesis does what Nintendo don't.
I
Um,
still remember the commercials of like a club
hmm
with like mascots, and there was like a couple of, I want to say like NFL dudes DJing,
Yeah.
and like they're like talking and whatever, and then it like zooms out and it's the console. It's
hmm
like the party's happening inside, and then you get the little like whispered, "It's thinking."
Yeah, and the little blinking light
Yeah.
there. Yeah, those advertisements were really, really great. And they really focused on the advertising a lot more than what they had done in the past with the previous generations, because they really stopped advertising with the Saturn just because of its being so unsuccessful in North America. It kind of paid homage to the Genesis era, where Sega, and at that point, was a very largely known for its advertising as well.
Well, they had a lot of ground to cover
hmm
because, I mean, not to go way back into it, but you had like Sega itself had really damaged their market share over here because you'd
Yeah.
had like the Sega CD and 32X, which had like so few games released for them
hmm
and were like essentially scrapped pretty quickly. And then you had the Saturn, which the same thing happened.
hmm
So now you've got an entire user base who are going to be incredibly gun shy to drop the money on your product.
Yeah,
So you
they had
really had to make.
betrayed the North American retailers and consumers a lot in the eyes of North America.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so much ground to cover into like build that extra hype.
hmm
I think they did a pretty good job of it too.
Yeah, they really did. And to attest to that, Sega actually set new sales records by selling more than, well, they sold 225,000 Dreamcast units within 24 hours in North America. And it was the console also sold 500,000 units in the first 2 weeks, which was like insane selling numbers.
Yeah.
And at the time, the Sega's market share was a lot smaller, but it actually held 31% of North America's video game market for the Christmas season of 1999. So things did actually look really good for Sega. It was as if
Yeah.
they were kind of back on top, despite the looming knowledge of the PlayStation 2 coming a year later. But it still looked like it boded well for Sega, because there's always like three or maybe more consoles on the market at a time ever since the 80s.
Yeah.
It you never really thought that there would only necessarily like there would only really be two or something like that. But yeah, the Dreamcast software to hardware attachment rate was also pretty phenomenal as well, where it had an attachment rate of eight, basically games sold for every console that was sold, which I feel is actually a pretty high number, and this actually contributed to the success of the console. But however, due to more consoles not being sold, that wasn't really getting money in Sega's pockets, though I'm certain that they got a stipend for every game sold due to the licensing agreements and stuff like that.
But
It
it's still like I mean, over time, even because unfortunately after the holiday season,
Yeah.
the sales started to dip.
Mhm.
And I mean, that was one of the complaints that they had, was that, even though we have like a software to hardware ratio
Yeah.
of 8 to 1,
Mhm.
we just don't have the install base to make that worthwhile.
Yeah, like it's ultimately the reason why the company Sega as a whole decided to stop hardware production of consoles in 2002 worldwide. And this tells me a story that the owners of the consoles of the Dreamcast highly enjoyed their purchase, especially buying that many games for their consoles. And it just, just wasn't enough to actually save the company as it was, due to all of the history of Sega, which maybe we'll go into a little bit more detail in a different episode. It just really changed their strategy on how they basically move forward with their business strategy in becoming a software only company in the console market. Just because hardware R&D and sales, like you always hear that really what the truth behind this is, like we'll never really know, but like how much money they're actually making on the consoles and how much they actually spend in R&D and everything like that. Like it's a lot of money if you look it up.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like they started selling it at a loss fairly early on
Mm-hmm.
in the life cycle of the
Es-
system.
Yeah, especially since I know the console went down in price when the PlayStation 2 was just around the horizon as well, to try and like entice people who are sitting on the fence. It's like, okay, well, this is going to be cheaper. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, not to get too far away, I know the 8-to-1 kind of ratio was an overtime thing,
Mm-hmm.
but um, you got to look at like initially, like to pull it back to the launch, you like they launched with what, 19 titles?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, we counted up all the games that came out on September 9th, and we got 19.
that's a lot of games to launch with. I
Yeah,
think the Wii had like 5.
potentially. I don't actually know the
I don't have
numbers.
an actual number on that, but I remember having most of them, and I remember most of them sucking.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some good stuff. I mean, we're gonna get into it in a little bit, but
Yeah.
like that's gonna help your games selling with a console.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you have big ticket things coming out on day one,
Mm-hmm.
that's that's huge, and you still don't really see that very often.
Yeah.
Like even the most recent generations,
Well, the problem with the recent generation, that like we've both talked about like off camera, is that a lot of the like 360, PS3, and PS4, Xbox issue is that a lot of the games that are coming out at launch are cross-platform to the previous generation.
yeah,
So it's like it's not necessarily a new game, because if you still had your PS3, for example, and it's coming out on the PS4, it's like, well, I could have just kept my PS4 and still gotten the game. And there's a lot of games that are on the launch window that have that, where this wasn't a thing in the past. Like you certainly did not have a game that came out on Saturn and on the Dreamcast, like unless it was a sports game. But then a lot of the time the games look different
yeah,
because of their hardware limitations. Where if you bought like let's say NHL 98 or something like that, or 99, whatever the your case might be, on either of the systems, whether it be the PS2 or the PS3, the games looked a lot different. That actually would like warrant a want to play it on the PS3, whereas the PS3 to the PS4, for example, the games looked very, very similar. In fact, they're basically just lower res or frame rate or something like that. The game itself was the same.
I know we see bigger quantities of games releasing now on day one with new consoles, but again, it's like you said, it's that, yeah, here's the sports titles that are coming out this holiday season.
Yeah,
Here's your AAA titles that are coming out this holiday season. Yeah, they're on the 360. They're also on the Xbox One. They're $10 more,
yeah,
but they look so much better,
hmm
but not really.
yeah. We live
But
in a world of we live more in a world now of cross-platform functionality. So
yeah.
it's less of driving factor. Yeah.
But like say something like the Switch, when we saw that come out, that had like what, 3 or 4 games?
Yeah, I had very few. Well, to be fair, a lot of people say that doesn't have a lot of games on the Switch, but like I think like 2/3 of the games that were released on the Switch were online only. There's no physical copies around the store. And this is the generation where we're really seeing a push of you don't have to go
That's
out and
true.
buy a disc. And like the next iteration of the consoles, they're going to be like that again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Yeah. But let's continue on and talk about the controller.
Well, yeah, because the controller was like one of my favorite things. It's
Mm-hmm.
one of the most comfortable controllers, right next to the Xbox controller, which basically stole the majority of its design from the
Yeah.
Dreamcast controller.
Minus maybe the wire sort of coming out of the bottom, but like, I did notice a lot of people who complain about the wire coming out of the bottom don't know that there's a little notch to like connect it so it actually goes forward. But I digress.
But they had no way to put it on the top because you have those 2 expansion ports
Yeah, you could have
for
made something, but
whatever you wanted to put in there. The only thing
yeah.
I ever had in it was either a VMU,
Mm-hmm. But
uh,
it took like a rumble pack, or there was a
or the
mic.
microphone for Seaman.
Well, there was Alien Storm, which was a kind
A
of a battle
poor
royale
version of
game.
Seaman.
No, it was a much better game than Seaman.
It's the only thing I can think of that would use a mic is a worse version of Seaman.
It gave you like in-game like ventrilo type chat to be able to talk with other people in the game, so it was pretty cool.
That is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like SOCOM, sort of. Not the game itself, but it just means the ability to talk to other people in the
Did
game.
it have
So.
Leonard Nimoy?
No.
Not as good as Seaman. Also a rumble pack,
Mm-hmm.
which it kind of weird that it didn't include like built-in rumble functionality.
Yeah,
I
but
feel like at that point of the
that was kind of the PlayStation's gimmick, though. Like it took a while, because did the original Xbox controller have Rumble in it?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, the original Xbox did, and I mean, in the previous gen, you could get a rumble pack for the um,
PS2.
N64,
Yeah, but it was external,
and then
and not a lot of games used
they
it.
did release they had the like DualShock 2,
Mhm.
which you could get for the PlayStation 1.
No,
Oh no, the original DualShock,
the DualShock,
and
was,
that had rumble functionality
Mhm.
for the PlayStation 1. So I feel like it should have been
Yeah, maybe like in the wings or something like that.
yeah, like it
Yeah.
should have been built in.
The Rumble pack is actually fairly good though. Like a lot of the times, like I find that the N64's Rumble pack is a little off center and too low for it to actually like matter on the controller. But
It sits in a
then
weird place
because of the way that your hands position on the controller, and even if it's on like a extra peripheral, it's actually fairly good. I like it. Yeah.
I gotta say, I like the dual triggers
Mm-hmm.
because that's outside of PlayStation. That's basically standard now.
Mm-hmm.
Even the PS4
Well,
controller, they
the
have
PS
like a hook.
the PS4 has the triggers.
Yeah, I mean, they're less triggery than the Xbox One controllers. But yeah, they do have a little bit of that to it now.
Yeah. And the triggers originally came out on the Saturn 3D controller, which is this controller right here. But
nobody knew about that.
nobody knew
Like
about it
7
unless you played
people owned a
Knights.
copy of Knights.
Yeah. But they're really the same controllers, actually, if you've ever looked at them. But
Yeah, they're incredibly similar. But at
Mhm.
least like this was pack in. Like that's
yeah,
open the box, that's what you get.
yeah, I
Whereas
made
the
it
3D
standard.
the 3D controller, you had to go buy Knights.
Mm-hmm. You could buy it separately, but yeah, yeah. Great controller to use with Croc.
But
Anyway.
I briefly brushed past it, but also the VMU,
Mm-hmm.
which was like
Yeah, it was. I really liked it because like in Quake, for example, it showed your ammo count, and there
oh,
was
that's
like
kind of cool.
yeah, and you did get like sometimes like little menu items there, like if you had a power up or something like that, they showed up on the VMU, or it could show you like your stat in an RPG or something like that. It was really really cool, and there's like the Chow game from Sonic, and that's really the only one that I played. So
And like 15 different versions of Snake
yeah,
for various different other games who are like, "Oh, we can put in like a little thing to play on your memory card."
yeah, it was kind of neat
Snake.
though. It was kind of like a little Tamagotchi thing, Tiger Electronics thing that you could take with you to school, and
Yeah, no, like
play a little game.
a lot of them had like cross compatibility where you'd like be leveling something up
Hmm.
and then you'd move it back over to the game and maybe your
Yeah.
character might be
But a lot of the
higher
games actually
level
used
or
it in the game. It didn't just like put a logo in it. It actually used it as a component of the
Yeah.
game. So it was really really cool. Like now you think about it, it's like, well, why would I want to look at my controller to do that? I could just see it on a HUD on the screen or something like that. But it was a gimmick. It was kind of neat. Yeah. Otherwise, I guess talk about a little the technology with the failure to. And this is kind of like another opinion on the launch. This is sort of what caused me to actually not want the Dreamcast initially and just decide to wait for the PS2 was the failure to have a DVD drive. and it uses something called a GD-ROM drive, which is it held a gigabyte, and basically this is a high level, not as technical overview of it. Basically, it's a laser that's on an angle that reads is able to read the data more concisely. And I guess the idea of it was it's like 1.5 times more than a CD because it's like 650 megabytes to a gig, so you're gaining basically almost 400 megs. But
Yeah.
so uh, you an idea of it was that basically I think it was harder to burn the CDs because of the way that it was so densely written on the disc, because a normal CD-ROM wouldn't necessarily be able to write that. And you're probably thinking, whoa, whoa, whoa,
But
wait, I've seen
yeah,
hundreds of like
I'm like
games.
every single person I knew that owned a Dreamcast
Yeah,
had a CD binder full of burned games.
like I said, I think that was the idea of it. But the reality of it is that once people figured out that if I remember how to do this correctly, you just write it bit per bit using like a certain application, and then you could basically um, write the game, and then sometimes they'd be on two discs and instead of one, just because, or it just didn't. Or initially, I don't think the larger games worked for burning. Maybe there was a way to get it to work, but I don't really know or care because I ended up buying all the games that I own on it. So, but yeah, so it wasn't impossible to, but it definitely limited you from just like putting it in and burning it and then like putting it in your system. But yeah.
But it's still like it was a bold move
Hmm.
to not put the DVD-ROM drive in there,
Yeah,
because
and
that was with the PS2 launching with that.
hmm
At the time, a DVD player was going to cost you at least around $100 anyways.
yeah, and if I recall correctly, like I think Sony took a hit on that, and
Oh, they must
yeah,
have.
and Sega probably didn't have the like luxury of being able to do that, especially since like the console Saturn tanked in North America effectively.
Yeah, they didn't
Like they
really
were
have the
very
money to
successful
do
in
it.
Japan, but like the R&D for this to put a DVD-ROM drive in there, like that would have increased the cost of the console. I doubt that they would have taken the hit on that. So that's probably one of the factors. But it was a leading factor of why I know a lot of people didn't get a Dreamcast. I did end up getting one like a year and a half after it launched, whenever like a bunch of it went on clearance. I bought it from a used game store. I think I've told that story before on this channel. But yeah, um,
I
it
I didn't. I bought mine many years later. It was the first console that I had joint custody with a person over.
cool,
Yep.
cool.
Jason, I don't know if you're out there, but I still have that Dreamcast. I don't know if I ever bought you out. I think we paid $35 for it.
Oh, okay. Wow, nice.
So, no, it was yeah, it's just an odd move at the time.
Hmm.
If you're going disc based, it really should have been a DVD-ROM drive.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, but the coolest thing about its launch was the creation of an online space in the console market. And
Yeah.
this wouldn't be 100% normalized until like the 360 or PS3 area, which is around 5 years later, whenever those consoles came out. It basically it's created a way for people to play online games together like out of the box without having to actually get a third party peripheral, whether that be the X-Band service for the SNES and Genesis, or the Seganet Link for the Saturn, which really only had like 5 games available for it. And that's the big thing about it, is that the amount of games that these old services had, the list of games that they worked with was very, very limiting. Not a lot of them. And again, they didn't come with the console. So a lot of people either don't even know about them or couldn't even afford them. And even in like, this was sort of the era where a lot more people were coming online, and
That's
the
true. Even the PS2 and GameCube
mhm.
had external modems that you had to buy for them.
Yeah, and at least they were made by first party company. Like,
Yes.
but it certainly paved the way for our understanding of online gameplay and stuff like that. And it really paved the way for the Xbox service in order to bring to people the Xbox Live service that everybody who's a big fan of Xbox is their main cited reason as to why they love the original Xbox.
Yeah, that was the main.
Hmm.
That was a main like driving factor as to why I bought an
Yeah. And
Xbox.
like obviously you probably think, oh no, it's the game. So it's like, well, what is that game? Is it online? If it's not Morrowind,
Or
it's probably an
the Old
online game.
Republic,
Yeah.
Knights of the Old Republic.
Okay, sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, that was a huge selling feature, and you didn't get the original Xbox until what? It was almost 3 years after the Dreamcast launched in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
We had
No,
nine.
no, no. It was 3 years after the Dreamcast.
We had
Yeah, three. Yes.
98 to 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like that's 3 years after, and another company's like, you know what, we really should be
Yeah.
like putting this in the package as a whole thing. Like it shouldn't be an external
Yeah.
like afterthought. Package it with it, and then you're gonna get people interested.
Mm-hmm. But let's go into our thoughts on the launch titles.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned, there is 19 games that came out for the Dreamcast for the console, and a part of the reason why there were so many of them was because Sega of America wanted to prevent a failed launch, especially with the failure of the Saturn in North America. By having a minimum of 15 games on release.
This is probably more games than ever released for the 32X.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it is. I think the 32X only has like 9 or 10 North American games.
it
I
was
might be wrong on that. If I am, I'll correct myself here.
but this was a good step to winning over the North American audience.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like a bunch of shovelware either.
Yeah,
Like they
they're
had some
fairly good games.
they had some really big titles in there, like we mentioned before.
Yeah, I put a list of them up.
And a wide variety of stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Like really things that could appeal to any group.
Yeah, they had everything from action, adventure, platforming, racing, sports, fighting games. A couple of them actually. One an arena fighting game, Power Stone, and a game that we'll talk about in a moment, Soul Calibur, which if
And
you know
Mortal
the Dreamcast.
and Mortal Kombat Gold.
Not at launch. Oh yes, it did.
Yeah, Mortal
Yeah,
Kombat Gold.
you are correct. Yeah, which is actually a really good version of Mortal Kombat. Yeah, and yeah,
But they were missing an RPG.
yeah. That was another interesting factor of me thinking of it because as if you're a regular viewer, you know that I really like role playing games and games of story. But
And in particular Sega role-playing games.
yeah.
Not just role-playing games.
But they did get Time Stalker on September 30th, which is a couple weeks after launch, which is a really, really great game. It's a solid title. And Evolution came out on December 16th before the year end. So they did have two
Which I believe the
RPGs.
reviews of Evolution where this game is so good, you should play this instead of Time Stalker. Pretty sure that's what they were.
No, they weren't.
Definitely.
Evolution was interesting. Its problem was that, and I think the reason why it kind of got like 6 and 7s out of 10s was that it definitely certainly was enjoyable, but it was very streamlined. It was shorter. I think it's like 20 to 30 hours if you do like most of the stuff in the game. And it was predictable in its story element beats because a lot of games had done what it did before. There were two of them for the console, and eventually it actually was combined into one game called Evolution Worlds, if I recall correctly, for the GameCube, which is potentially the better version because it takes out a lot of the grindy stuff. But yeah, so it is an interesting game. I highly recommend looking at it if you're a big fan of role playing games. But just be warned, it isn't going to be the best RPG that you've ever played, and it's not necessarily the best RPG that you can play on the console. But it's been years since I've played it, so maybe if I look back on it, then I'd have a little bit better opinion on it. But yeah, it's certainly like a 6 or 7 out of 10.
So,
Let's talk about a launch title that got 10 out of 10.
Yeah, it
And
wasn't Time Stalkers, I'll tell you that
no,
much.
it wasn't. It almost did, but it wasn't Time Stalkers. Why is this a big deal? So, a lot of game publications in the past and game journalists were a little bit more stringy on giving high reviews on a game. You wouldn't see a lot of like 9.8s out of 10s or even 9s, for example. During this era,
No.
they didn't hand things out for free just because they got a review copy of something. And yeah, Soul Calibur was one of these games that got a perfect score with a lot of uh, game journalists and reviewers, and one of those being Famitsu, and they gave it a 40 out of 40, or like a perfect score. It
Yeah.
was the second title out of their score system to actually get it. The first being Zelda Ocarina of Time. And they don't give out perfect scores that often. If you look up their list of perfect score games, like there's quite a few of them now, but there's
But
still not that many of them.
it starts with Ocarina of Time and
Yeah.
then Soul Calibur for the
And for
Dreamcast.
context, they'd been reviewing games since I think early 80s, if I recall correctly. It's a Japanese magazine that's been in publication forever.
Yeah, it's a very old publication.
But very prestigious as well. And GameSpot and IGN back in the day, whenever I find that they wrote better reviews, this is my opinion, my hot take on it, they also gave the game 10 out of 10 as well. But to this game's testament as well, Soul Calibur has also retroactively over time have gotten on a lot of people's top fighting game and gaming lists, whether it be Game Informer, IGN, Retro Gamer, Electronic Gaming Monthly, Screw Attack.
Well, and this
Yeah.
is it's not it's not even necessarily that it's on all these lists.
hmm
I think the biggest thing for me is that was a launch title.
Yeah.
Like
Especially like it
like what
so successful and great in people's minds, and a lot of the times, like unless it's Mario Brothers, it's generally not so well regarded.
I mean, honestly, outside of Breath of the Wild,
hmm
I I can't think of a launch title that has gotten that much praise.
hmm Yeah, the only other game that I can really think of off the top of my head would be the original Mario Brothers with the North American launch of the Nintendo because of what it is, right? Yeah, but
But I don't see that on the 10 out of 10 list.
yeah, that's very true. Yeah, cause yeah. So the reason why we're mentioning this is because it's kind of important. Like a lot of the games on here are really great games for this console, and even some games that we don't necessarily mention. There's a lot of great games for this system. A lot of hidden gems that some people just didn't necessarily have a chance to play. And like you said, the fact that this was a launch game, and normally launch games aren't that great, and it was that great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, the game is still great to play. It's smooth, it looks good. The gameplay is pretty stellar. It's maybe a little dated for fighting mechanics, but I mean, it's a weapon fighting game. Like, yeah, it's great.
I mean, we got to give one shout out to Power Stone too.
That is true.
I've never played Power Stone.
I'll try and fix this, folks.
I believe him, but I know that Power Stone is super important.
Mm-hmm.
And again, launch title.
Yeah.
Like that was available day one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I would have bought if I went in the store and bought a Dreamcast when it first came out.
Yeah.
I would be so conflicted with everything that was released.
Yeah.
Again, another thing that came out, which is super interesting. I guess not to me. I'm like, oh, to me, this is really important. But I just think overall, it is kind of interesting. Was NFL 2K
mm-hmm.
because EA came out ahead of time and was like, yeah, we're not releasing anything for the Dreamcast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a lot of different things suggested from both camps.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of sounds like EA wanted like an exclusive deal.
Yeah.
Sega had just spent like $10 million buying Visual Concepts.
Yeah.
Who, for reference, actually worked on a lot of sports titles for EA back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Because back in the early 90s, you had like EA, I guess Midway did a little bit,
Hmm.
later into the 90s and 2000s, you had like 989.
Hmm.
But really, EA was kind of your main like sports.
Yeah, that was kind of the main one, but also Sega Sports was another big one too, because there was a lot of those titles on the Genesis, for
Well,
example.
that's very true, but I just it's super interesting that like Sega had just bought this company
Hmm.
that had actually done a lot of titles, like of the EA Sports titles
Hmm.
in the 90s. Like they had done, I think it was like 2 of the Madden games for the Super Nintendo. They had done, I think, NHL 97
Hmm.
for the PS1
Yeah, they also
and
did 90.
Saturn.
Yeah.
Um, and then you get I want to say it was Larry Probst, who was he was the president,
Yeah, he was the CEO.
and he's like, we want an exclusive deal. Sega's like, no, and he's like, well, all right, you get nothing.
Yeah, we're going over to
That's not a
PlayStation, I
direct quote, but like,
guess.
yeah, he's like, no. Even though, again, it's the same company that was working with EA that
Hmm.
they bought, and then they go on, they make NFL 2K
Hmm.
and do all of the 2K games from that point.
Yeah.
When the Dreamcast like eats it, they get bought by Take-Two Interactive,
Yeah.
who immediately moves them to the like, I guess, boutique label of 2K.
Hmm.
So they essentially release games under the like 2K sports titles.
Hmm.
So they do like your NBA 2K games and the WWE games,
Yeah.
because those are the two franchises not owned by EA.
Yeah, because they did also do some earlier NHL 2K games, but now there's a exclusivity deal where 2K has an exclusivity deal with, like you said, the NBA and
The
WWE.
NBA and the WWE, and then EA has the NFL and the NHL,
Hmm.
which is I mean, we can do a whole other like episode on this. I know we did an episode on sports a little while ago, but
Yeah.
this is kind of an interesting thing that we will get into at some other point.
Yes, we found this interesting, especially since it kind of actually came out from like Sega and during the life cycle of the Dreamcast. And it's kind of neat how it's sort of related to that um, in the history of the development of sort of like sports and video games that
Yeah, like
Sega sort of had a large
this
part
brought
in.
us 2K.
Hmm.
Like this brought us all the 2K sports games. I mean, right up until the point where EA signed exclusivity deals with the NFL first
Hmm.
and then the NHL, all of your 2K games were visual concepts.
Hmm.
It's it's just it's fascinating. I mean, I know at the time it was a really big deal when EA signed that exclusive deal with
Hmm.
the NFL, and then we ended up having like NCAA games.
Hmm.
But again, those were all 2K.
Hmm.
So you have this company who really like kind of found their niche
Yeah.
from this division between Sega and EA,
Hmm.
who I think probably had a great relationship prior to that, because you had
Yeah.
all of the EA like fat cartridges for the Genesis.
Hmm.
Like that's how you could tell what an EA game was.
Yeah, because Sega allowed them to basically make their own cartridges instead of being forced to have Nintendo make their cartridges, which is a big, huge thing in EA's history.
Yeah.
Whenever, yeah, EA made good games.
The shade.
Yeah, that's my hot take.
But
uh,
there was one more big thing we want to talk about release wise. Not me. I
I
don't
did
want to talk
though.
about it.
The return of Sonic. Oh my god, it was so exciting. Sonic Adventure came out as a launch title, and this is personally a high point of the console in a lot of Sega fans and Sonic fans' opinions. Essentially because they skipped the Sega Saturn. I mean, there was a running game and a fighting game and a 3D game, which didn't really feel like a Sonic game, but was fun in its own right, but it wasn't Sonic. Um, and yeah, so with the cancellation of Sonic Extreme and this game actually coming out and it looking a lot better than any of the concepts art that was released before, and with the advent of like 3D platforming being a really big thing now with Crash Bandicoot and Mario and other games. And yeah, the magazine articles and preview material for this game tracked it really well and thoroughly, and it was a large interest in myself personally with the console, reading the articles and stuff like that online and in magazines. And yeah, I was pretty excited about it, and it ended up being a fairly different game. It's sort of created the branch and divide between the classic 2D retro fans and the 3D fans of style of Sonic games, to the point where Sonic Generations came out, which was a great game much later, which kind of blended both of those styles together and took their best aspects. But yeah, nonetheless, it is fairly good game, and
This is my only issue.
yeah.
My only issue.
hmm
Sonic takes a subway.
Sonic also drives a car. I mean,
Why would he ever why would Sonic ever need a vehicle? Like, I understand maybe you wanted to take a break, but you're the fastest thing out there.
yeah,
Man, he's just gotta go fast.
gotta go fast.
So what, like, gotta sit down and go at like
Sometimes you
medium
gotta
speed?
take a break.
Yeah, he can take a break when he gets there.
I mean, he also, well, I guess he can't. Well, he can fly in supersonic mode, but normal Sonic mode can't fly, so he uses tails, biplane. I mean, yeah. Anyway, for me, it didn't fail to impress. It was a great game, and
I mean, the whale
yeah,
thing was pretty cool.
yeah. It was fast. It was colorful.
Unless you're taking the train.
It was very different, and best of all, it was fun. And it's what many fans wanted, and it brought many new fans to the our favorite blue friend. And
It's true, and
yeah.
again, a launch title.
So we've alluded to the console having some really great games, and we decided to choose three of our favorites. This list was not easy to make, but we
It
also
was for me. Super easy.
that's yeah.
It's not. It's not. I definitely have some things that I should have mentioned, but
Yeah.
didn't.
So let's start off with my first game. All my friends can probably guess what the game this is.
And viewers can guess what this is.
Yeah.
We're talking about this. We're talking about the Dreamcast.
Mm-hmm. It's online.
What's your favorite game, JC?
Phantasy Star Online.
Yeah.
It saddens me that this service is not available anymore. Although I do know that there's private servers and you can play with other people there and whatnot. But it's a bygone era. It's a really great game. Still have my character.
You can still play it on the GameCube.
That's true, with 4 players.
Yep.
So that's truly the better version. But if you do play it on the GameCube, make sure that you get the episode 1 and 2 plus version. It is the one that has all the extra DLC that they gave out. So, because you can't get that stuff anymore because the servers are down. But anyway, yeah. So Phantasy Star Online, it's an RPG. You run around and kill monsters, gain experience points, gain items, get more powerful. It's kind of like a really simplified MMO with 4 people, but you can only play with 1 person now because of Dreamcast. But anyway, Phantasy Star Online. Your first one, Ian?
Jet Ground Radio.
That's a great game.
Yeah, man. Great soundtrack.
Great style.
Yeah, like visually appealing. I know control-wise it doesn't stand up. Jet Set Radio Future is probably a better version.
Right.
If you want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for the time, this was fantastic. And the soundtrack was just off the hook.
Yeah.
Your next one?
Grandia 2. People who are subscribers to the channel probably know I really like game arts, and this is the second installment of the Grandia series, and yeah, it's a great game. It's if you want to go back and play it, maybe get the collection of it because I'm pretty sure that has that come out yet?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, the HD collection.
yeah, and yeah. So Grandia 2, it's a great RPG. Awesome storyline, has some voice acting in it, which was pretty cool for the time, especially since more of the dialogue was voice acted.
Well, yeah.
And yeah, it looked great, and just overall great RPG. Ian?
Omicron. It was one of the first games from Quantic Dream.
Mm-hmm.
It features their unique style of story-driven gameplay,
Yeah.
and it actually has David Bowie in it,
Mm-hmm.
as well as he contributed like 3 songs to the soundtrack,
Yeah.
straight off of his Hours CD, which was his newest one at the time. So yeah, it's worthwhile. There's a very poorly looking David Bowie performing in it. I mean, at the time, yeah, it looked amazing, and it blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I shouldn't even say that because I played this probably like 5 years after it came out, but I was like, whoa, it's David Bowie.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
This is one of the games that I actually have not played for the system that I'm
I will
gonna
fix that,
eventually
people.
will eventually get to though. My last one on the list is Resident Evil Code Veronica. This was a Resident Evil game for the console, and yeah, it's not the best Resident Evil ever, but it's a very good one, in my opinion. And it looks great on the console, and yeah, it's a Resident Evil game. So like, what there's there not to like if you liked Resident Evil? This is a game that you wanted to pick up. It was available on the Dreamcast first. I mean, eventually it was on the PlayStation 2, but we got it on this console first, so that was pretty cool. Your last one, Ian?
Skies of Arcadia.
This one's technically on my list too, but
Because Sky Pirates
one of the best RPGs ever.
and Sky Pirates.
Yeah,
But like on that note, there was like maybe what 10 RPGs on the system.
yeah,
There was like so little. I mean, I know we only had like a year and a half,
mm-hmm.
but considering the level of um Sega RPGs
Yeah,
that there were previously, this is really surprising.
yeah. And like you said, I think a part of the reason why was partially because of two reasons. One of them is because the life cycle of the console wasn't long enough. And the other reason why is because of multi-genre. And to clarify, like a lot of the games that are on the Dreamcast or in any video game, as we talked about in our RPG episode, which you can check out if that interests you. Multi-genre, the RPG elements are almost in every video game.
Yeah.
And whenever we're talking RPG, we kind of decided like, okay, well, let's look and classify like if a third of its content is RPG like style material, then it's an RPG, so to speak. So that's what stance we're taking on it um in this context. But I think that's one of the reasons why, because like there's a few games that are have RPG elements, but they're not really RPGs.
Yeah.
So
But still, like, not a lot on the system.
hmm
If you're going to play one,
yep.
play this one.
Mm-hmm.
I know
Yeah.
JC's probably going to disagree and be like,
No,
Phantasy
I
Star.
don't. If you're gonna play one Dreamcast RPG, it's Skies of Arcadia,
Yep.
hands down.
And that's from the guy who loves Phantasy Star.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
There you go.
this is the RPG to play on the console, hands down, no questions asked.
And like there was tons of other great games that were released for the console. You know, those are just a couple of our favorites.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like, you know, you had the Crazy Taxi, Choo Choo Rocket, Space Channel 5,
Mhm.
just piles and piles of good content
Yeah,
that were released for the system over a very short period of time.
yeah.
Um,
There's definitely a lot of powerful strikes through its life. They went down kicking and screaming. That's for sure.
They really did, and it left a lasting impact because you've seen a lot of those games continue on, get ported onto other systems, get remakes,
Mhm.
even sequels. I mean, we're about to get a Shenmue 3,
Yeah.
and that was a
Hopefully it's
should just drive a forklift all day long.
good. Yeah, I guess you could.
But yeah, like it's had such an impact on the video game landscape
Mm-hmm.
that we're still feeling the ripple effects of it today.
Yeah, especially since like it was the first console to come with a modem in the box, which is a big deal, and it was far ahead of its time because of that. The next console, as you mentioned, was the original Xbox, which is in 2001, which is about 3 years later, of the Japanese launch anyway. Especially with the ability with the web browser CD and having a keyboard and mouse peripheral, you had the availability to more cheaply get on the internet or to play games on the internet with people
Yeah, like
because
we
the
said, like
PC wasn't cheap.
this is $200.
Yeah.
Like this launched at $200 in North America,
Mm-hmm.
and you had, I think, I want to say 400,000 registered online users.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for the Dreamcast, like
Yeah.
that's at the time in '99
Yeah.
to get a PC, you were gonna pay probably at least $1,000.
And that number, 400,000 in North America, there was 1.5 million registered users online. And if you take how many consoles they sold in the short amount of time that the console was around, which is 9.13 million, it's 16.4% of everybody who had a console was registered on the internet.
And that's
That's
and that,
insane.
but that's 9 million consoles sold.
Hmm.
I mean, think about how many of those were like rentals or like demo units or
Well, that doesn't count demo units. They're not
okay, yeah, I
sales.
guess demo units. I'm trying to think of other examples, but like even rentals,
Hmm.
like how many hundreds of thousands of those do you think went to like Blockbusters or like mom and pop shops? Like a lot.
Hmm.
That takes up a huge chunk of that. So I mean,
Yeah, it might be
the
500,000 of those.
like there's quite a few of those consoles that were online
Hmm.
and people were taking advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no cheaper way to get the internet. And you didn't see web browsing as easily on a system
Hmm.
until like future generations, like the
Yeah,
PS3.
PS3. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the biggest one that I can think of. But
Or
yeah.
the Wii.
Hmm. And like you're probably saying, okay, yeah, there's like online, like who cares? Like previous generations had online, but the big thing is that there's a lot of games that were online. Like all the 2K2 sports titles were online, Quake 3, Unreal, Bomberman Online, Fantasy Star Episode 1 or Part 1 and Part 2 for the Dreamcast. There's many more games on that were available online. Surprisingly, a large amount of them. Um,
Well, and
and
that's just it. Like some of the first games that we played online period were shooters.
hmm
And to have two of the biggest,
yeah,
Unreal Tournament and Quake 3,
hmm
like those are huge. Unreal Tournament was fantastic.
hmm
And to have an online version that you could play without spending a grand.
yeah, and I had the keyboard and mouse at the time, and being able, it was like uh, really fluent on online play.
We're not
Like
going to start that debate.
it,
But yeah, like
well,
the
for what it was, it certainly like it wasn't as great as a PC, obviously, but if you had dial-up internet anyway, like yeah, it was definitely playable and it was enjoyable. That's my point.
yeah, I thought you were going into the keyboard and mouse versus
No, I was just
okay.
argue about it elsewhere. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. In closing, yeah, the
20 years.
20 years, great
And we're
console, great launch, great games, great legacy, really.
yeah, still seeing the impact of it now. It's a damn shame that it went down, but
Hmm.
I guess I'm almost glad that it did because we really did get a lot of good things out of that. We got a lot of Sega games on a lot of different systems. We saw Sonic abused so many times and then finally get a couple good games over the last few years. So, yeah, arguably worth it. Um Yeah, let us know what your favorite aspect of the Dreamcast is and what you feel about, like, how you feel about its legacy down in the comments below.
Yeah. And be sure to like and subscribe. And be sure to check out our podcast every week. It's released on Wednesdays. On Tuesdays, Ian is doing a Bargain
Unti-
Hunted.
Untitled cheap video game show.
Yeah. And commentary videos to come as well between the two of us during the week as we find time and interesting topics to talk about. So, yeah. Have a great day, and we'll see you next episode.